China is preparing something of terrifying significance, a move so dark it could cripple the US economy overnight. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's real. Beijing is weaponizing tiny metals called rare earth elements, and America might not even know what's coming until it's too late. These 17 seemingly insignificant minerals power everything from your smartphone screen and high-speed internet cables to the F-35 stealth fighter jet in our military. And on November 1, 2025, China plans to tighten its chokehold on them. If these new export controls take effect, it could ground our jets, stall auto plants, and send shockwaves through every high-tech industry. The alarm bells are already sounding. Rare earth elements are the hidden heart of modern technology. They include elements like neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and many others most people have never heard of, yet without them our gadgets simply won't work. These metals create the powerful permanent magnets in virtually every electronic device, electric car motor, and even the MRI machines in hospitals. For instance, an average electric vehicle contains about 1 to 2 kilograms of rare earth magnets in its motors. Remove those magnets, and the car simply will not run. The latest smartphones, advanced sensors, and cutting-edge defense equipment all depend on these metals. Lose them, and our world goes dark. Our military technology depends on them too. Each F-35 stealth fighter jet packs roughly 900 pounds of rare earth metals in its navigation and weapons systems. A single Virginia-class submarine needs around 9,200 pounds of rare earth magnets and alloys to operate its sonar, propulsion, and defense mechanisms. Defense analysts warn that rare earths are crucial for various defense technologies, including F-35 fighter jets, Virginia-class submarines, Tomahawk missiles, and Predator drones. Without a steady flow of neodymium, dysprosium, and the rest, those systems simply can't be built. Imagine an F-35 grounded on the tarmac or a submarine sitting idle at port, not because of enemy action, but because a key raw material is missing. And here's the truly frightening part: China controls nearly all of the supply of these vital metals. Through decades of massive mining operations and lax environmental rules, Beijing has amassed roughly 44 million tons of rare earth reserves, about half of the world's known total. Even more crucially, China processes and refines about 90% of the world's output. That means if rare earths are the fuel of the high-tech age, China holds the pump handle. No other country even comes close. China's dominance is the secret behind its industrial rise. In fact, Chinese manufacturers set world prices because they have a lock on supply. For example, the Chinese automaker BYD leveraged this advantage to flood global markets with low-cost electric cars. They sold over 4 million EVs in 2024, far outpacing US rivals, not just by superior engineering, but by guaranteed access to cheap magnets. It's no coincidence. While the West relied on foreign sources, China treated rare earths as a strategic resource. This dominance was built on a trade-off the world once rejected. China dug mines and built factories at breakneck speed, ignoring pollution and building toxic waste ponds the size of stadiums. Entire villages near those mines became known as cancer villages, from toxic runoff. Western countries simply wouldn't allow such pollution, so their mines closed. China's willingness to pay the environmental cost gave it a tremendous price advantage, and ultimately a monopoly. Now the other nations are paying the strategic cost. Now imagine that chokehold being tightened even further. After months of tense negotiations and a shaky trade truce, Beijing dropped a bombshell in mid-2025, new export controls on dozens of rare earth products, effective November 1, 2025. This wasn't a minor tariff dispute, it included the critical items, like processed neodymium and dysprosium oxides and even the finished permanent magnets themselves. In effect, China signaled it could cut off a huge part of our supply chain at the push of a button. The implications were immediate and terrifying. Factories and labs around the world realized they might have to shut down when November arrives. Across America, alarm bells rang. Companies frantically checked their inventories of magnets and rare earth components. As soon as the news leaked, prices for these materials shot up on global markets. Engineers and supply chain managers counted the parts on hand as if they were counting bullets before a battle. Then on October 10, 2025, President Trump publicly blew the whistle on this move. He called China's plan unprecedented, and warned the world that America would respond. In a fiery statement he announced 100% tariffs on Chinese imports starting November 1, a direct retaliation, and even tightened U.S. restrictions on its own high-tech exports. Trump described China's action as an outright attack on U.S. business. They're weaponizing our dependence on rare earths, he said. Suddenly, this skirmish in trade had escalated into what he called economic warfare, an open threat to U.S. security. The media quickly joined the frenzy. Pundits on cable news grabbed buzzwords: economic nuclear war, magnet bomb, supply chain hostage. One anchor warned flatly, if China flips the rare earth switch, it could kill American industry. Another commentator pointed out that cutting off rare earths is almost like cutting the power lines to the country. Social media lit up with ominous memes and graphics, countdown clocks to November 1st, Chinese flags exploding with magnets, headlines screaming that the US faced an invisible arsenal it couldn't defend against. The narrative was clear, something ominous was happening, and everyone from investors to workers in blue-collar towns started to panic. Meanwhile, Chinese officials played it down publicly. They insisted that this was just a routine measure to safeguard national security, that licenses would still be granted for civilian uses as needed. But no one believed it. After all, how could anyone rebuild jet engines or cars without these magnets from China? The global story had already taken shape, China was showing its power, and the rest of the world was watching in fear. By spring 2025, the warning signs were already evident. In April 2025, when China quietly tightened exports for the first time, the effects were immediate. A Reuters report noted that major auto plants worldwide were pausing production due to the resulting magnet shortages. Electronics factories idled assembly lines. Companies making hybrid car motors or robot parts started delaying shipments. Now, with the November cutoff looming, the panic has only grown. Executives are counting inventory like life depends on it. One major automaker even began redesigning a motor to use ceramic magnets, which contain no rare earths. But that took months of re-engineering and still sacrifices performance. For now, factories have hope only in the magnets already on site. If China turns the tap fully off on November 1st, many American and global manufacturers could literally run out of motors, speakers and sensors overnight. And make no mistake, this chokehold reaches straight into our defense. Think tanks have bluntly stated it, rare earths are crucial for our advanced weapons. If China cut off neodymium and dysprosium, then a lot of that high-tech gear we rely on wouldn't work. Imagine telling our pilots, sorry, no mission today, we're out of magnets. It might sound absurd, but it could happen. The US military has never faced a vulnerability like this in peacetime. Some generals privately worry that at some point the F-35 or other systems could be rendered less effective not by enemy fire, but by our own shortage of materials. To drive the point home, consider history. In 2010, during a dispute with Japan, China actually did cut off rare earth exports to Japan as leverage. The result was global panic. Prices of dysprosium and other elements shot through the roof. Japanese manufacturers lost production for months. The world realized then that rare earth supply was a major risk. They then scrambled to diversify. Mines in Australia and Vietnam were developed, stockpiles built. But it took years to recover stability. We barely learned that lesson, and now the crisis is much broader. Today, the US and entire Western allies find themselves similarly exposed. If China uses its rare earth advantage, even partially, we could be about to relive that nightmare on a much larger scale. In Washington, panic has fully set in. The Department of Defense is now treating this as an urgent priority. In July 2025, the Pentagon invested $400 million into MP Materials, effectively becoming the company's largest shareholder, to ensure their California mine stays open and grows. They also loaned $150 million to expand processing at that site. Congress has scrambled to write or pass legislation to speed up mine permitting, and even discussed emergency stockpiling of magnets. All this to rebuild a supply chain that was allowed to crumble. The moves are bold, but the situation is severe. We are literally building a mine-to-magnet pipeline for defense as we speak. Even with all this effort, the gap is enormous. MP Materials says that by 2025 it hopes to produce about 1,000 metric tons of magnet-making material per year. That sounds big, until you compare it to China's scale. China alone produced well over 100,000 tons in a single recent year. In other words, if China were producing 100 buckets of magnets, we're scrambling to produce just one bucket. Other US projects, like a new rare earth plant in Texas and a planned mine in Alaska, are on the horizon, but those won't be ready for years. Bottom line, even after spending billions, a new domestic supply chain will still be a trickle compared to what China can shut off at will. Some hope lies in recycling and innovation. Tech companies are urging everyone to recycle old phones and batteries to reclaim rare earths. Researchers are engineering new magnet designs using less critical materials. Tesla has announced electric motors that reduce or eliminate rare earth usage for one part of the drive system. Even so, these are medium to long-term fixes. They cannot instantly produce the tons of magnets needed to run factories and militaries. Right now, they're at best a sliver of security. Our allies are moving too. Japan, still smarting from 2010, reopened one of the world's largest rare earth mines and is processing its own materials. The European Union passed a critical raw materials act to fund alternative sources from Africa, Australia, and recycling. Australia is rapidly expanding its rare earth output. In June 2025, G7 leaders quietly agreed to cooperate on securing these supplies. But none of these measures create instant shipments. They are like stocking up sandbags before a flood, necessary for the future, but the floodwaters may arrive first. The economic fallout could be sweeping. Without reliable rare earth supply, factories will slow or halt, costs will climb, and jobs could be at risk. If EV production drops, companies might lay off assembly workers. If electronics plants pause, engineers and technicians sit idle. Investors are already nervously watching earnings forecasts. A serious output cut could shave multiple points off GDP growth as industries everywhere struggle to adapt. On the consumer side, prices for gadgets, green energy products, and even everyday items could jump. We may not yet see shortages on store shelves, but if costs rise or new releases stall, everyone will notice. Imagine going to buy a new smartphone or electric car and hearing, "Sorry, not available yet due to supply issues."
It could happen.
In fact, analysts forecast that even a partial rare earth embargo could force companies to delay new models or limit production. The ripple effect is hard to overstate. A shortage of magnets could almost literally ground the modern economy. Some economists are already raising red flags, noting that in the worst case this could lead to something akin to a mini-recession or at least a significant business downturn. For everyday Americans, this may sound abstract until it isn't. Rare earths are hidden in simple things: the vibration motor in your phone, the generator in a wind turbine, the speaker in your car. If those vanish, conveniences become catastrophes. People might start noticing that electronic toys are missing features or are more expensive. Job cuts in factories could affect families. Our drive to go green with more EVs and wind farms could stall, forcing a pivot back to older technology. In a worst-case scenario, even supply chains for critical healthcare or communications gear could be tested. Here's the bottom line: rare earths have become the new battleground of the US-China rivalry. A few hundred grams of metal, seemingly trivial, now hold the power to change the rules of global trade. We're witnessing a crisis of supply dependence that could decide who dominates the next era of technology and military power.